"You're nothing but a burden, Margaret. Stop pretending you matter." That was what my daughter-in-law said on my 64th birthday, right before she handed me a broom in front of everyone. The laughter that followed still rings in my ears. My son didn't defend me. He just looked down at his plate, pretending the candles on my cake didn't exist. That was the moment something inside me cracked and quietly died. It was supposed to be a small family dinner. Claire had planned it, or at least that's what she told me. She always made sure people knew she was the one organizing things, not the old woman who lived upstairs. I'd spent the whole afternoon preparing the roast, setting the table, even buying flowers. She hadn't wanted me to cook, but deep down she knew the food would taste better if I did. That was my role: make everything perfect, then disappear before the guests arrived. When the doorbell rang, I was still wearing my apron. Claire glided through the hallway in her tight red dress, smiling the smile that looked good on camera. "Mom, could you hurry up with the dishes before people come in?" she whispered sharply. Her voice dropped to that sweet pitch she used when others could hear. "We don't want a mess, do we?" I swallowed my pride, nodded, and went back to the kitchen. For years, I had convinced myself this was normal. After my husband died, I moved in with Ethan and Claire so I wouldn't be alone. They said it would be nice having me around, like family again. But little by little, the word family became a disguise for free labor. I cooked, cleaned, folded laundry, paid bills when Ethan's salary came up short. I told myself love was about sacrifice, and if I kept giving, they'd see my worth. I was wrong. That night, Claire's friends filled the dining room, 8 of them, all laughing, wine glasses clinking. I could hear them talking about their new house renovation, about Ethan's promotion, about the fancy vacation they were planning. None of them knew I had paid the property taxes that year. None of them knew the promotion came with a salary that barely covered their car loan. I stood behind the door frame, invisible, listening to the life I was financing. When Claire called my name, I stepped out with a tray of champagne flutes. "Everyone, this is Ethan's mom," she said, her smile perfectly frozen. "She's our personal chef, therapist, and part-time babysitter." Laughter, a few polite claps. My hands trembled, but I forced a smile. "Happy birthday, Margaret," one of her friends said awkwardly. "You don't look a day over 60. More laughter. Claire leaned closer, her voice dripping with sugar and venom. "Come on, Mom, at least pretend to enjoy yourself. You owe us that much." Then, as I turned to go back to the kitchen, someone spilled red wine across the white tablecloth. "Oh no," Claire gasped theatrically. "Mom, quick, before it stains." I reached for a towel, but she stopped me. "No, use this." She handed me the broom she'd been hiding behind her chair, smirking. "You're so good at cleaning. Why not make it a show? Sweep up your mess before we eat the cake." The room went silent. My son didn't move. My guests avoided my eyes. The only sound was the drip of wine onto the floor. I could feel my cheeks burning, my throat tightening, my dignity collapsing like a fragile bridge. I wanted to scream, to throw the broom, to demand they stop. But instead, I knelt. I wiped the spill with trembling hands while Claire's voice floated above me, calm and cutting. "Good job, Mom. Now you can finally say you did something useful on your birthday." Everyone laughed again. Ethan laughed too. That was the moment I decided. Tonight would be the last night I'd ever spend under that roof. When I walked into that house 3 years ago, I thought I was saving my son. Ethan had just lost his job, and Claire was struggling to keep her small business afloat. I remember standing in their unfinished living room, boxes still everywhere, and hearing Ethan say, "Mom, it'll just be for a few months, until we get back on our feet." I smiled, hugged him, and said, "That's what family is for." I had no idea I was signing up for servitude. At first, things were peaceful. I cooked dinner, helped clean, and paid for groceries now and then. It felt good to be needed. When my husband Robert died, silence had filled every corner of my life. Moving in with Ethan made that silence fade. There was laughter again, a reason to wake up early and make breakfast. But little by little, The tone of the house changed. The laughter stopped being warm. It became sharp, sarcastic, often at my expense. Claire started giving me little suggestions. "Mom, maybe you could do the laundry while I'm working. Could you iron Ethan's shirts? You know how bad he is at that. Since you're home most of the day, could you make sure the kitchen is spotless before dinner?" Each request was small on its own, harmless even. But soon the requests became expectations, and the expectations turned into orders. Ethan never noticed, or maybe he didn't want to notice. He was busy proving himself at work, always tired, always distracted. Whenever I mentioned that Claire seemed impatient, he'd sigh and say, "Mom, she's just stressed. Try not to take it personally." I tried. God knows I tried. Then one day, I overheard them talking in the living room. I was in the hallway folding laundry when Claire whispered, "Your mom's always here. I can't relax when she's around." Ethan muttered something I couldn't quite hear, and then Claire said, "She's not a guest, Ethan. She's part of the house now. She should help out." That night, I cried quietly into my pillow. It wasn't what she said. It was that he didn't defend me. From then on, I stopped being Mom. I became Margaret. "Margaret, can you get the door? Margaret, could you wash the guest sheets? Margaret, you left crumbs on the counter." Every word stripped away another layer of dignity. I started feeling like an unpaid maid who happened to share their last name. Money became another weapon. At first, I helped with small bills, utilities, groceries. Then Ethan mentioned that the mortgage rate had gone up. "Just until we adjust," he said. I transferred money from my savings. When their car broke down, I covered the repairs. When Claire wanted to remodel the kitchen, I wrote the check. They never asked directly after a while. They just expected it. "You're so generous, Mom," Ethan would say with a quick hug before rushing off to work. I thought generosity was love. It took me years to see that love without respect is just manipulation wearing perfume. I remember one evening vividly. I had spent hours cleaning before some of Claire's colleagues came over for dinner. Everything sparkled. The table was set with the silverware Robert and I bought on our 25th anniversary. I wanted it to look perfect. When the guests arrived, I stayed in the kitchen, as usual. Halfway through the meal, one of them asked where I was. Claire smiled and said, "Oh, that's just Ethan's mom. She likes to stay busy, can't sit still for a minute." They laughed, and I laughed too, from behind the door, holding back tears. After that night, something in me began to harden. I started to see them not as my family, but as strangers I happened to live with. I noticed how Claire's voice softened only when she needed something. I noticed how Ethan's eyes darted away whenever I tried to talk about the future, my future. And I noticed how, in that entire house, not a single thing truly belonged to me anymore. Not the furniture, not the photos on the wall, not even the air felt like mine. On my 64th birthday, I thought maybe, just maybe, things would be different. Ethan told me to get dressed nicely. "Claire's planning something special," he said. I put on my best blue dress, the one Robert used to say made me look elegant. I curled my hair, put on lipstick, even wore the necklace Ethan had given me when he was 12. I wanted to believe my son still saw me. That night, as I walked into the dining room and saw the candles, the cake, the decorations, I actually felt hope. And then Claire said it. "You're nothing but a burden, Margaret. Stop pretending you matter." Everyone laughed. Ethan didn't say a word. The sound of their laughter dug deep into my bones. It wasn't just cruel, it was familiar. It was every little moment of dismissal, every sigh, every command, every unspoken, "You don't belong." I realized that I had been slowly erased for years, and this was just the final stroke. When the guests left, I cleaned up as usual. I washed the dishes, wiped the counters, folded the tablecloth, everything in silence. Ethan kissed Claire goodnight and went upstairs without looking at me. The house was quiet again, the kind of silence that feels like punishment. I sat alone at the table, staring at the leftover cake. My name was written on it in pink frosting. "Happy birthday, Mom." The irony made me laugh out loud. It sounded strange, hollow, like a sound from someone else's throat. That night, I didn't cry. I just packed a small suitcase, took one last look at the house I had turned into a home for them, and whispered to myself, enough. It was 2 a.m. when I closed the door behind me. The air outside was cold, but for the first time in years, it didn't hurt to breathe. The motel smelled like bleach and old carpet, but that night it felt like a palace. The neon sign outside flickered vacancy in broken red letters, casting a faint glow through the thin curtains. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed, still wearing the blue dress from my birthday, and realized how quiet the world could be when no one was demanding anything from you. For the first time in years, no one called my name, no one told me what I'd done wrong, and no one sighed when I entered the room. Just silence. Beautiful, terrifying silence. I didn't sleep much. My hands kept shaking, not from fear, but from the kind of adrenaline that comes when you finally do something you never believed you had the courage to do. At dawn, I walked to a diner 2 blocks away, a place called Sunnyside Cafe. The sign outside promised breakfast served with a smile. I hadn't had a smile served to me in years. The waitress looked to be in her 40s with tired eyes but a warm grin. "Good morning, hun. You want the special?" she asked. I nodded. "Coffee. Black, please." When she brought the cup, she said, "You visiting or just passing through?" "Just starting over," I said. She smiled again. "Good for you." Those 3 words nearly undid me. No judgment, no pity, just kindness. When she called me ma'am, my throat tightened. I wasn't invisible here. I was a customer, a person, someone who mattered, even for 5 minutes over burnt toast and lukewarm coffee. When I got back to the motel, I pulled out my old laptop, the one Robert and I had used to manage our finances years ago. I hadn't logged into my personal account since before he died. Back then, I didn't need to. Everything went into our joint savings, and later, most of that money went into helping Ethan get his fresh start. Still, Robert had always told me, "Keep something for yourself, Maggie. A woman should always have her own key to the door." My hands trembled as I typed my password. The screen loaded slowly, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. And then there it was, 218,460. I blinked. Once, twice. Then I laughed. Not the kind of laugh that comes from joy, but from disbelief. The sound of someone realizing they'd been living small while sitting on a fortune. In that moment, everything connected. The mortgage payments, the car, the bills. Ethan and Claire hadn't been helping me. I had been paying for everything. They'd been living off me like parasites while convincing me I was the burden. I opened another tab and checked the transfer history. Thousands gone each month. $1 in $700 to the mortgage, $400 to utilities, $250 for Ethan's car insurance, all automated, all quietly draining me. I canceled every single one. As I clicked confirm, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, control. I stared at the computer screen, the numbers still glowing. For the first time since Robert's death, I wasn't just surviving, I was reclaiming. That thought made me sit taller, breathe deeper. My reflection in the mirror looked older than I remembered, but my eyes, those looked alive again. By noon, Ethan had texted me 7 times. "Mom, where are you?" "Claire's worried. Please stop this, come home, let's talk." "Mom, you're being dramatic." "Mom, answer me." I didn't reply. Each message felt smaller, weaker. The more he wrote, the more I realized he wasn't worried about me. He was worried about the bills that would bounce without my name on them. Around 3 in the afternoon, he called. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then he called again and again. On the 4th try, I picked up. "Mom, thank God. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "Where are you? Claire's freaking out." "I'm in a safe place. Please just come home. We'll talk this out." There's nothing to talk about, Ethan. What do you mean? You can't just leave like this. I didn't leave, Ethan. I was pushed out. What? No one pushed you out. I laughed softly. Then what would you call what happened last night? He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Look, Mom, Claire didn't mean what she said. She was just tired. You know how she gets. Tired? She humiliated me in front of your friends. She apologized to me. She'll apologize to you too. Did you apologize, Ethan? His silence answered for him. I canceled the payments, I said finally. What payments? The ones you've been living off. What are you talking about? The mortgage, the utilities, your car, your credit cards, all of it. Mom, that's not funny. It's not meant to be funny. Mom, how could you do that? We'll lose the house. You mean the house I've been paying for? You'll manage. Mom, please, just until I get my next bonus. No, Ethan, you've had 3 years of bonuses. I'm done. He tried again, his voice cracking between anger and fear. Mom, please don't ruin everything. You're overreacting. We love you. No, Ethan, I said quietly. You love what I provide. I hung up. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel scared. I felt powerful. I spent the next 2 days at the motel, planning what came next. I opened a new account at a different bank branch across town, transferred most of my money there. The woman helping me asked if I wanted to close the old one completely. No, I said, smiling faintly. Let them call and wonder. That night, I took a long shower, scrubbing away the smell of that house, of burnt dinners and resentment. When I stepped out, I caught my reflection again. The wrinkles were still there, but my shoulders looked straighter, my eyes steadier. I whispered to the mirror, Welcome back, Margaret. It wasn't just an escape anymore. It was a beginning. 3 days passed before Ethan showed up. I knew he would. Men like my son don't give up easily, not when their comfort is at stake. It was around 10 in the morning when I saw his car pull into the motel parking lot, the same silver SUV I'd helped him buy 2 years ago. I stood by the window and watched him get out, phone in hand, pacing before he knocked on my door. Mom, open up! His voice was sharp, but it wavered, the way it did when he wasn't sure if he was angry or scared. I opened the door just enough to see his face. His eyes looked tired, his hair unkempt. Ethan, I said calmly. Jesus, Mom. What are you doing here? You've got people worried sick. People? Or bills? He blinked. What? I checked my accounts, Ethan. I know exactly what's been happening. He tried to step closer, but I didn't move aside. Mom, this isn't the place to talk about it. Come home, please. We'll sort everything out. I'm home enough right here, I said. He exhaled hard, trying to collect himself. Okay, maybe we messed up. Maybe Claire went too far. But we're family. You can't just walk away from that. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not my little boy, but a man who had learned to take without ever thinking about the cost. Family doesn't treat each other like servants, Ethan. Family doesn't make you clean your own birthday cake off the floor. His expression cracked. She was drunk, Mom. Stop. My voice was firm. Don't make excuses for her, or for yourself. He hesitated. You're angry, I get it. But what are you going to do? Live in a motel for the rest of your life? You need us. The laugh that escaped me sounded foreign, almost cruel. I needed you. Past tense. Now I only need peace. He stared at me for a long time, his jaw tightening. So that's it? You're just cutting us off over one bad night? One bad night, I repeated. Ethan, it's been years of bad nights. I just finally decided to stop pretending they were normal. He looked down, then back up with something colder in his eyes. Claire says you've been acting unstable, that you're confused. Maybe it's your medication. My medication? I interrupted. Nice touch. Did she rehearse that one? Mom, come on, don't make this ugly. It's already ugly, Ethan. You just didn't notice until the money stopped flowing. He rubbed his temples, sighing. Fine. If you want your little independence phase, fine. But don't blame us when things fall apart." "Nothing's falling apart," I said quietly. "Things are finally falling into place." He muttered something under his breath and walked off. I closed the door before he could say more. The moment the latch clicked, I exhaled. My hands were shaking, but not from fear this time, from adrenaline. For the first time in decades, I'd said everything I needed to say, and no one talked over me. A week later, a letter arrived at the motel, a legal envelope. I knew before I opened it. Inside was a notice from a lawyer, Ethan's lawyer, claiming that I was financially incapacitated and that Ethan was seeking temporary control of my assets for her safety and well-being. My stomach twisted. They weren't just trying to guilt me anymore. They wanted to take everything. I drove straight to the nearest law office I could find. The attorney was a young woman named Denise who looked like she hadn't slept in a week. When she heard my story, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Mrs. Lewis, they don't have a case. You're of sound mind, you've got documentation, and frankly, you've got every receipt showing they depended on you, not the other way around." "Can they take anything?" I asked. She smiled. "Not unless you let them." Denise helped me file a counterclaim, officially cutting any joint financial ties. When the paperwork was done, she looked at me with a grin. "You know, I see people your age get steamrolled all the time. It's nice to see someone push back." I smiled faintly. It's nice to finally be someone who does. The next few weeks were quiet, too quiet. Then, one afternoon, I got a voicemail from Claire. Her voice was syrupy, trembling with fake sincerity. "Margaret, it's Claire. We just want to talk. No lawyers, no drama. Ethan's really worried about you. Please, let's meet for coffee." I didn't call back. 2 days later, another message. "Margaret, please. I know we've had our differences, but we're still family. Ethan's been sick over this. Please, can we start over?" And then a third. "You're making a mistake, Margaret. You'll regret this." That one made me smile. It was the first honest thing she'd said. A week later, they showed up. It was early evening. The sun was setting behind the parking lot when their SUV pulled in again. This time, both of them got out. I could see the exhaustion in Ethan's face and the cold anger behind Claire's polished smile. She looked at me like a cat studying a bird she used to toy with. "Margaret," she began, voice dripping sweetness, "we just want to clear the air." I stepped outside, folding my arms, then breathed somewhere else. Her smile faltered. "You don't mean that. You're just upset." "I've been upset for 3 years. Now I'm done." "Do you even hear yourself?" she snapped. "You're walking away from your own family." "I'm walking away from 2 people who forgot what that word means." Ethan tried to speak, but I raised a hand. "You don't get to talk right now. For years, you let her disrespect me in my own home. You laughed when she humiliated me. You called it stress. You called it tiredness. Do you know what I call it now? Cruelty." Claire crossed her arms. "We gave you a home." "You gave me walls to clean." She glared. "You're bitter." "No," I said softly. "I'm free." There was nothing left to say. Ethan's shoulders slumped, and for a brief moment I saw the boy he used to be, the one who used to bring me wildflowers from the yard, who used to say I was the strongest woman in the world. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd traded his conscience for comfort. I turned to go back inside, and Claire called after me, voice rising. "You'll regret this, Margaret. You're old, alone. You'll come crawling back." I looked over my shoulder and smiled faintly. Maybe, but at least I'll crawl on my own floor. Then I closed the door. After they left, I stood at the door for a long time, listening to the silence return. No voices, no orders, no guilt pressing down on my chest. The air felt heavier, but it was mine. Every breath was mine. 2 weeks later, I packed my suitcase again. Not out of fear this time, but out of choice. I drove south to Arizona, where my younger sister Helen lived. She'd called after hearing what happened. "Come stay with me," she said. "We'll figure things out." I hadn't seen her in nearly a decade. She greeted me at the door with the same laugh she had when we were kids, arms open wide, eyes soft with understanding. "You look thinner," she said, "but stronger." Her house was small but bright, with sunlight spilling through the kitchen windows and the smell of lavender everywhere. That first night, we stayed up talking until 2 in the morning, about Robert, about Ethan, about the years I'd lost trying to please people who saw me as an obligation. Helen listened without judgment. She didn't try to fix anything. She just let me speak, and in that space I realized how much I'd forgotten the sound of my own voice. The days that followed felt like learning to live again. I'd wake up without an alarm, make coffee, and sit by the porch, watching the desert sky blush pink before sunrise. Sometimes Helen and I would drive into town just to buy peaches or wander through thrift stores. No one expected anything from me. No one called me Margaret like it was a command. I was just Maggie again, the way Robert used to say it, like a secret, not a title. A few weeks later, I found a small art studio near Helen's house that offered free classes for seniors. I hadn't painted in years, not since before Robert died. The first time I held a brush again, my hands trembled. But when the color touched the canvas, a deep, calm blue, it felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. I painted for hours. When I looked at what I'd made, it wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Every stroke, every shade, it was a part of me that had been waiting patiently in the dark, waiting for this. I started keeping a journal, too, not to write about pain, but about small victories. Today I made my own breakfast and didn't rush. Today I laughed. Today I felt free. Those words looked fragile on paper, but they were the strongest I'd written in years. 3 months passed before I heard from Ethan again. It was a Saturday morning. I was helping Helen in the garden when my phone rang. His voice was small, tired, almost hollow. "Mom." I froze. "Ethan, can we talk?" I hesitated, then nodded to myself. "Go ahead." He took a deep breath. "Claire's gone. She filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. She took the car, the savings, everything. I lost the house. I don't know what to do." I said nothing. The silence stretched between us, heavy but honest. "I know I messed up," he continued. "You were right about everything. I should have protected you. I should have listened. I was stupid. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I saw him again. The little boy who used to fall asleep on my lap after long car rides. The boy who used to say he'd take care of me when I got old. I wanted to believe that boy was still somewhere inside the man on the phone. "I forgive you," I said quietly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean going back." He sniffled. "I didn't expect you to." There was a long pause. Then softly he said, "I hope you're happy, Mom." I smiled, a real one this time. "I am." When the call ended, I didn't cry. I just sat in the garden, feeling the sun on my face. Helen handed me a cup of iced tea and said, "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think I finally am." That night, I sat on the porch and looked up at the stars. The desert was quiet except for the hum of crickets. I thought about the years I'd spent serving people who never looked at me long enough to see me. I thought about Robert, about how proud he would have been that I finally found my voice again. There was a time when I believed my life ended the day he died, but now I understood something deeper. Sometimes your life doesn't end, it just waits. It waits for you to stop being small, to stop begging to be seen, to finally walk away from the people who mistake your kindness for weakness. I whispered to the night, "I'm home, Robert." A tear rolled down my cheek, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from peace, the kind that comes when you've survived the fire and realized it didn't burn you, it refined you. The next morning, Helen found me sketching on the porch, the sunlight glowing behind me. "What are you drawing?" she asked. "My new life," I said. She smiled. "Looks beautiful already." I looked down at the page. It was messy, colorful, imperfect, and alive, just like me. And for the first time in decades, I felt whole. Because I didn't need a house or anyone's approval, or even a title like Mom or Mrs. Lewis. I just needed to remember who I was before the world tried to make me forget. Margaret Lewis, 64 years old, finally free. And that, I realized, was the best birthday gift I ever gave myself.